In a forest near a distant castle, a 12-year-old boy named Jean von Rajnia expresses his disbelief and excitement. He has stumbled upon a lesser dragon and considers himself incredibly lucky to have found such a creature so close to home. The beast lets out a ferocious roar, lunging towards him. Unfazed, Jean calmly invokes his innate ability, skill magic enhancement, a blessing of the magic god. He dodges as the dragon's head smashes into the earth, thinking the display of force is awesome. In response, he prepares his own spell, gathering wind magic into his hand as a glowing pattern forms. He thrusts his palm forward, unleashing the spell through a large, brilliant magical circle that materializes before him. The blast of pure force strikes the lesser dragon directly in the head, sending it reeling backward. With the beast stunned and defeated, Jean stands confidently amidst the shattered ground, noting with satisfaction that he can now properly use magic. He reflects on his performance, pleased that he did better than he thought. With this level of power, he feels assured he can get through the meeting with his father scheduled for the next day. The next day, inside the Marquis of Rajnia's estate, Jean is confronted by his father. The Marquis acknowledges Jin's 12th birthday and coldly asks on whose permission he acted. Jean internally scoffs at the question, thinking his father is brazen. Their conversation is interrupted by a woman and another young boy. The boy sneers that Jean is from a lowly commoner's lineage. The woman agrees, calling Jean a sneaky thief cat who is just like his mother. His father's voice cuts in, stating plainly, "Jean, I'm the one who called you." Jean grits his teeth, his face a mask of fury and humiliation as the other two laugh mockingly behind him. He stands before a man, his uncle, who levels a harsh accusation. The man claims to have heard from Alphonse that Jean has been entering the family treasure room, stealing and selling a precious magic book and the family's treasured sword. Jean can only react with stunned disbelief. In response to the charge, he vehemently denies being a thief and warns them not to speak ill of his mother. From a distance, his father, the Marquis, simply states that this is enough and expresses his disappointment in Jean. As the tension mounts, another boy, Alphonse, steps forward with a cruel smirk, magic crackling in his hand. He offers Jean a choice between two paths. The first option, he explains, is that he will do nothing, but will instead let Alphonse use him as a magic target to teach him a lesson. His father then coldly delivers the second option, to be dropped from the Rajnian family entirely. The Marquis's gaze is merciless as he reminds Jean that without the family name, he is nothing and has no real choice in the matter. To everyone's surprise, his expression hardens. He confirms his understanding that his only other choice is to be Alphonse's target, and then calmly declares that he will leave the family. He adds that he will be glad to do so, stunning Alphonse into silence. His decision causes an uproar. His uncle demands to know by whose authority he is saying such things, while another young family member expresses confusion and outrage at his words. Ignoring the commotion, Alphonse decides to force the issue. He declares that this feels right, commanding Jean to shut up and become his practice target as he unleashes a powerful blast of magic. He laughs maniacally, telling Jean to take a good look at his magic. The torrent of energy surges across the grand hall, aimed directly at the defiant boy, but the attack finds no target. Jean has vanished from his spot, easily dodging the blast. The magic slams into the wall behind where he stood, shattering stone and plaster. Alphonse can only stare in shock, exclaiming that he dodged it. The powerful impact destabilizes the hall structure. As the ceiling begins to crack and crumble, raining down debris, his uncle and the other boy cry out Alphonse's name in alarm. He turns his back on the exploding manor, calmly waving goodbye. The power of Alphonse's magic was just as he expected, strong enough to demolish the entire house. With a final, casual farewell, he thanks them for their care and walks away. This moment of departure, however, was preceded by a memory from his birthday. He recalls sitting alone on the grand staircase, a profound sense of unease washing over him. The truth then flooded his mind with startling clarity. He had been reincarnated. In a past life, at the age of 30, he had died in a car accident, the image of an oncoming truck forever seared into his memory. He had been reborn as Jean von Rajnia, a name that struck him as strangely familiar, though he couldn't immediately place why. As he sat lost in thought on the stairs, a maid approached, chiding him for napping in such an open place. Without another word, she tipped a vase of flowers, splashing cold water all over his head. Startled, he stammered an apology as she coldly told him he was in the way of her cleaning and ordered him to get lost. He quickly scrambled to his feet and fled. Running down the hall, a manic laugh escaped his lips. His suspicions had been correct all along. He threw open the doors to a grand room, seeking confirmation. Staring at his own reflection in a large mirror, the full, horrifying truth crashed down upon him. He recognized this character. It was a character from a video game he had poured countless hours into in his previous life. His mind raced, recalling the game's title, The Holy Sword Hero and the Seven Warrior Women. It was a dating simulation game where a hero, chosen by a holy sword, fought against a demon king with the help of 7 warrior girls. He remembered it for its well-crafted characters, including its uniquely portrayed villains. And among all those characters, one stood out for his infamy, Jean von Rajnia, universally known as the worst character in the entire game. He recalled there was a specific reason for this reputation, a dark path the character would walk around the age of 15. He recalled the grim future of the character he now inhabited. Jean von Rajnia was destined to lose his fiancée, Flora, to the hero. Defeated and abandoned by his family, he would choose a path of evil, plunging the world into chaos and committing relentless atrocities against innocent people, even women and children. The weight of this knowledge crashed down on him, making him question his current age. This was why Jean was known as the worst character in the entire game. A spark of an idea ignited within him. If this truly was the world of a game, then he should be able to check his status. He raised his hand, focusing his intent on the word status. A translucent screen materialized before him with a soft chime. A wave of relief washed over him as he saw his age, 12 years old. He had not yet fallen into darkness. The screen displayed his full details. Jean von Rajnia, age 12, level 28, with formidable strength and magical abilities. It confirmed he was, as expected, the strongest character in the game. This was, without a doubt, the world of the Holy Sword hero and the 7 warrior women. He decided his first priority was to test his magic. Just then, a maid entered his room, asking if there were any important events following his 12th birthday, and wondering if the head of the family would call for him tomorrow. He dismissed the thought and handed the maid a letter, asking her to deliver it to his fiancée. He announced his intention to cut ties with the house and leave immediately. He recalled the game's lore. It was said that Jin's mother died from an epidemic, but the truth was she was assassinated. The loss of his only family left a deep wound on the original Jin, but he decided there was no use dwelling on it now. He remembered the original game's timeline. At age 15, 3 years from now, Jin would be abandoned by his family and begin his descent into darkness. He had never left his home or his estate in the game. But now, by leaving the house at 12, he had already diverged from the game's path. He felt confident that with the knowledge from his previous life, he could foresee what was to come. As he walked, he reached the edge of the aristocratic district and was stopped by 2 guards. One of them asked what a lost child was doing there. He calmly replied that he knew this was the civic district. The guard, seemingly satisfied, simply warned him to be careful on his way. Stepping into the bustling streets of the commoner's district, he made a firm resolution. He would avoid all the evil routes, escape the bad ending, and save himself no matter what it took. Standing in a bustling town square, the young boy Jean von Rajnia comes to a stark realization. In his previous life, he was a man named Hitoshi Dojima. Now, he has been reborn into the world of the game he once played, the Holy Sword hero and the 7 warrior women, not as a hero, but as the villain. He steels his resolve, determined to forge a new path. Fortunately, he knows there are still 3 years before the game's main story begins, and Jean goes astray. With his knowledge of the future, he decides he will avoid all the evil routes laid out for his character and escape the bad ending that awaits. As he walks through the streets, he marvels at how much more realistic the people are compared to the non-player characters of the game. His thoughts are interrupted by a cheerful street vendor offering him delicious-looking sweet bean pastry skewers. He considers his options for survival. If he wants to earn his own way in this world, he concludes that the best path forward is to become an adventurer. He gazes up at a large, stately building that seems to fit the purpose. His mind fills with the romantic ideal of an adventurer, a symbol of freedom, where one's identity, wealth, and fame are all dependent on ability alone. Now that he's been cast out of his noble house, this path seems perfect for him. With his decision made, he steps inside the building, the Adventurers Guild. He recalled from the game that this was a key location for earning money and meeting important characters. As he scans the room, his eyes lock onto a woman with prominent beast-like ears, a character he recognizes instantly. He stares so intently that the woman notices. She turns to him with a playful, confident smile, remarking on his aristocratic appearance. She leans in, teasingly warning the little boy that he'll be in trouble if he keeps staring at her so intensely. Her teasing escalates as she leans closer, whispering a flirtatious offer of a quest with her at night for the price of 10 gold coins. Jean flushes, completely taken aback. At that moment, another adventurer calls out from across the room, telling her to stop making fun of the kid. The woman with rabbit ears sighs playfully, saying it's too bad before telling him to go and register. Flustered, Jean quickly clarifies that he is not yet an adventurer. Before she can respond, a sharp voice cuts through the guild hall. A woman behind the counter sternly calls out, "That's enough. Elsa, stop teasing the newcomer." Jean is stunned. He realizes with a jolt that there was no such event in the game. His knowledge of this world is already proving to be incomplete. He stammers, taken aback by the sudden apology. The guild receptionist introduces herself as Finn, expressing regret on behalf of the others. Flustered, Jean declares his intention to register as an adventurer. He internally marvels at the stark difference between this reality and the game he knew, where the guild characters were all faceless and generic. She hands him a registration form, asking if he knows how to write. As he begins to fill out the document, he confirms to himself that Finn is exactly as he remembers her from the game, a comforting point of familiarity amidst the unexpected. Upon receiving the completed form, Finn immediately asks if he wants to accept a request right away. The question catches him by surprise. He hesitates, admitting that he's still worried about his lack of proper equipment. Finn agrees with his caution, remarking that some people lose their lives because they neglect their gear. Her concern is genuine. She offers to introduce him to a blacksmith if he'd like. Jean is touched by her thoughtfulness for a new adventurer's safety, thinking to himself that he would be glad to have her continue looking out for him. Despite the kind offer, he politely declines, assuring her that he already has a particular shop in mind. Finn smiles and accepts his answer. With that, the registration is complete. Finn hands him his official guild card, the process having gone much more smoothly than he had anticipated. The moment he accepts the card, the other adventurers at the bar raise their mugs in a toast. They congratulate the little boy, welcoming him to the world of adventurers. Jean looks on, startled by the warm reception. A quick succession of images flashes in his mind. The guild hall, his own determined expression, and the smiling face of Elsa raising her own mug in celebration. Stepping out onto the street, he reflects on the experience. The characters he never paid much mind to in the game are so unique and full of life here. He decides this feeling isn't so bad after all. He reflected on the original story he knew. If that version of Jean had become an adventurer, he might never have fallen into darkness. He resolved not to let his guard down, knowing that even he was unsure when he might start down that same evil path. To avoid that fate, he knew he first needed to equip himself properly, deciding to use the knowledge from his previous life to his advantage. He approached a building that appeared to be a simple private house with no sign. He knew its secret. It was a hidden store that only appeared midway through the story, unknown to almost everyone. Inside, a hunched figure in a heavy hood, leaning on a gnarled staff, expressed surprise. They remarked on what a rare sight it was for such a young boy to have found his way here. Jean stood before the mysterious shopkeeper and offered a simple, polite greeting. The hooded figure remained silent for a moment, observing him. The shopkeeper let out a raspy laugh, noting how calm Jean was. They mentioned he was only the second person not to be frightened by their appearance, and questioned what he found so amusing. Jean smirked, relieved that everything was proceeding just as it had in the game. She called him a rude brat. Jean, however, paid her no mind, his attention captured by the impressive array of wares. He thought to himself that the number of items was amazing, just as expected for a shop that only appears in the middle stages of the story. He turned back to the shopkeeper, a knowing look in his eyes. He asked how long she intended to continue with the old woman act, pointing out that it was becoming suspicious. The shopkeeper feigned ignorance, insisting she was just an old woman. But Jean countered, stating he could see her long years. Flustered, she threw off her disguise, revealing the form of a young elf. She demanded to know how he found out, before admitting that while she's considered young by elven standards, she is still quite old. She vehemently denies being a grandmother, her cheeks flushing with indignation. When Jean questions her choice of disguise, she explains that the appearance of an old woman suited the suspicious nature of the store. Flustered, she admits that all her previous customers have been adults and pointedly asks what he wants. He ignores her agitation and asks for her name, introducing himself as Jean and promising to become a frequent customer. Taken aback for a moment, she accepts his handshake and introduces herself as Cynthia. Her gaze then shifts to his attire, leading her to deduce that he must be an aristocrat or the son of a wealthy family. She asks if he is there to purchase weapons for himself. He confirms her assessment of his status, but admits that he currently has very little money on him. She reminds him that her shop deals exclusively in expensive equipment, implying his funds might be insufficient. He reveals the full extent of his poverty, presenting just 2 gold coins. He explains that he only left his home the day before and is going through a difficult time, a revelation that leaves Cynthia stunned. She exclaims that such a meager sum can't buy anything in her store. Jean acknowledges this, but pleads with her to find some way to help him. An idea strikes her. Cynthia proposes a deal. She will consider his request if he agrees to run a small errand for her. Seeing no other choice, Jean readily agrees. With the terms accepted, she flips one of the gold coins back toward him. He catches it as Cynthia cheerfully declares their negotiations complete. Cynthia explains to Jean that she doesn't have enough flowers to decorate her shop and asks if he can buy some for a silver coin. Jean is momentarily taken aback, recalling that no such quest existed in the game he knew. He approaches a nearby flower stall, where a vendor offers her wares. As he considers, his attention is drawn to a young woman with rabbit ears selling flowers from basket. Suddenly, a large, imposing figure carelessly bumps into her, causing her to cry out in surprise. The impact sends her basket tumbling, scattering the delicate white flowers across the cobblestones. The armored man who collided with her whirls around, his face contorted in anger as he furiously demands to know where she was looking, calling her a damned rabbit. He continues his tirade, pointing to a minuscule mark on his pauldron. He shouts that she scratched his expensive equipment and demands that she pay for the damages, leaving the girl trembling in fear. The man sneers, claiming the repair cost is 10 gold coins. He then makes a vile suggestion, offering her a job, selling her body to pay the debt. Before the terrified girl can respond, Jean steps in, his voice cutting through the tension. He declares that the man's equipment isn't even worth that much. His lie exposed, the adventurer's face twists in rage. He dismisses the value of the armor, claiming Jean would find out the truth eventually anyway. Drawing his sword, he menacingly asks the damned brat if he wants to be killed. He raises the broadsword, his eyes burning with fury. He snarls, asking if Jean is making fun of him and vowing to make the boy regret ever making him angry. As the man swings his blade down with a roar, Jean remains perfectly composed. He calmly asks what the adventurer was thinking attacking him so suddenly. His composure only enrages the man further. With a snarl, he declares that he's no longer holding back and that he will split the boy in two. Before the sword can complete its arc, Jean moves with startling speed. He pivots and lands a precise kick on the man's sword hand. The adventurer cries out as the weapon is knocked from his grasp. He follows up by driving his fist squarely into the aggressive adventurer's face, knocking the man off his feet. The adventurer collapses to the ground. Standing over the fallen man, Jean questions if he truly believed his equipment was all that mattered. As the rabbit-eared girl looks on in shock, he then turns his attention to the flower girl, asking how much her flowers cost. She nervously replies that they are 3 copper coins for one. He thanks her and accepts a small bouquet. When he offers payment, the girl is taken aback, exclaiming that the amount is far too much. With a gentle smile, Jean announces that in that case, he will buy all the flowers she has. He reassures the stunned girl that it's all right, as a single silver coin holds little value for him. As they complete the exchange, a small white bird lands on a nearby planter, observing them. Moments later, he arrives at the door of a timber-framed building. Pushing it open, he announces that he has brought some flowers as requested. Inside, the elven shopkeeper greets him, remarking on his quick return. With the small white bird now perched on her finger, she asks if he managed to find the perfect flowers for decorating the shop. She clarifies that whether she likes them or not will depend on his choice, then asks to see what he brought. The bird waits patiently on the windowsill. He hesitates for a moment, looking slightly nervous. Then, instead of simply pulling the bouquet from a bag, a shimmering light appears before him, and the flowers materialize from this magical space as he presents them. Her eyes widen in astonishment. She points, asking in disbelief if he possesses an item box. Jean, looking genuinely confused by her reaction, simply asks if it's not something everyone has. He watched as the elven shopkeeper, Cynthia, reacted with surprise to his question. She quickly clarified that an item box is far from common. In fact, it's a skill every merchant dreams of possessing. With a slight blush, she then apologized, admitting she was testing him to see if he could be trusted. Jean, however, seemed to take it all in stride, clenching a fist in excitement and declaring that he had now acquired some proper equipment. Inside the equipment shop, Jean von Rajnia thanks the elven shopkeeper, Cynthia, for her help. Waving cheerfully, she tells him to wait a moment, promising to find the perfect equipment for him. She returns shortly, apologizing for the wait. As she presents his new gear, Jean reflects internally. He knows the shop's inventory is only from the first half of the game he remembers, making him curious about the equipment's quality. He reminds himself to remain cautious, aware that this world holds differences from the one he knew. Now wearing a dark cloak and tunic, Jean expresses his amazement at the quality. Cynthia explains that the equipment is made from lizardman leather, a material considered nearly as good as dragons. She then playfully raises a wooden club, warning him not to be surprised. With a powerful swing, she strikes his armored arm. The blow lands with a sharp crack, but Jean is completely unharmed. Cynthia points out that the material is not only durable but also breathable. With the armor proven, she offers him a single-handed sword and a dagger. She asks if he was seriously considering fighting monsters with his bare hands. Jean looks away, unable to deny. Outside the shop, Jean hesitantly asks if she is sure about giving him the equipment. He reminds her that he doesn't have much money on him at the moment. She dismisses his concerns with a confident wink, assuring him it's all right. She tells him to think of it as a small service, confident that he will become a regular customer. She continues with a warm smile, adding that even though she may not look it, she has a very good eye for people. Her words seem to convince him. Holding up a coin, Jean states that he senses no ill intent from her and can't think of a reason to refuse her offer. He makes a solemn promise to repay this debt one day. His serious vow is met with an exasperated look from Cynthia. She tells him it's just a single gold coin. Jean reacts with shock, sputtering that no matter the cost, it's still a debt. He thanked her, still processing the exchange. Cynthia simply smiled, explaining she was relieved that the equipment, which had only been collecting dust in the warehouse, would finally be put to good use. With that, she declared his debt was clear. He promised to use the new gear carefully, noting that while it was a little big for him now, he was sure he would get used to it. Unconcerned, Cynthia asked him how the new equipment felt. She was glad to hear his positive response. She then extended another generous offer, telling Jean that since she had taken a liking to him, she would sell him anything else he chose from the store for a lower price. He questioned the kindness, asking if it was really okay for her to do so for someone she had just met. She simply reassured him that it was her shop, and therefore her decision to make. Stunned into silence, he could only watch as she winked playfully, stating that she had a hunch he would prove to be a good investment. His mind reeled. He knew from his past life that in the game, it was incredibly rare for Cynthia to offer such help. A reward of this magnitude was typically only given after accomplishing a truly great deed. A sudden, horrifying thought struck him as a painful memory surfaced, the day he was cast out of his home. He cried out in his mind, wondering if her kindness was somehow connected to that event. He quickly pushed the thought aside, deciding that if Cynthia said it was fine, he would simply take her word for it. She watched him with a curious, smiling expression. Standing alone in the shop, he looked around and came to a grim conclusion. There was no point in overthinking things. Even though his surroundings looked just like they did in the game, this was no longer a game. The memory of his family's cold stares as he was forced to his knees was proof enough. If this were truly a game, he never would have been able to leave the house in the first place. He stared at the item Cynthia presented, his eyes wide with a mix of confusion and recognition. He asked her what it was, his voice filled with disbelief. The jar was filled with shimmering, spherical candies. Cynthia explained that it was a candy-shaped magic potion. His eyes widened in astonishment. It was exactly as he'd suspected, mana candy. He recalled its significance from his past life's knowledge. It was the strongest recovery potion, an invaluable item from mana battles that was supposed to appear only in the later phases of the game. Returning to the present, he cautiously inquired about the price. Cynthia casually stated that 10 pieces cost a single silver coin, a price so low it left him utterly stunned. She seemed taken aback by his shock, finding his reaction surprising. She then clarified that the candies were homemade. She elaborated, explaining that since she made them as a personal hobby, she saw no reason to attach a high price to them. He stared at the jars, a new plan forming in his mind. He asked what the total cost would be to purchase all of them together. Cynthia, surprised, revealed that there were 100 pieces available in total. After a moment's thought, she quoted a price of 5 half-silver coins for the entire stock. Without a moment's hesitation, he declared he would take them all. The deal was struck. His gloved hand carefully placed the coins into her waiting palm, finalizing the sale. He clutched the jar of mana candy, his eyes wide with excitement. With this, he realized he wouldn't have to worry about his mana consumption. The shopkeeper, Cynthia, observed his uncharacteristically childlike expression, remarking that she'd always seen him as mature and mysterious. Jean, looking away slightly, confirmed that he liked the candy, particularly for its effect. His comment prompted Cynthia to ask about mana recovery. She noted that standard magic potions typically offer a high rate of recovery, implying a burst of restoration. He agreed that the candy provides a high rate of mana recovery, but then clarified that it was, in fact, far more effective than a standard potion. Cynthia looked puzzled by his assertion, unable to immediately grasp why that would be the case. Tapping the lid of the jar, he offered to explain it simply. He began by outlining a common combat scenario. When using magic, adventurers typically cast simple spells that consume only a small amount of mana. Therefore, he continued, it is more efficient to recover that small amount of spent magic continuously by licking the candy from the start, rather than stopping to open and consume individual recovery potions. He concluded his tactical breakdown by pointing out that with the candy, a mage could continue fighting without interruption, never needing to pause to use a potion. A look of sudden understanding dawned on Cynthia's face. She touched her chin thoughtfully, remarking that she could now perfectly imagine such a situation. She crossed her arms, her expression turning serious. She asked if this meant he intended to use all 100 pieces. With a calm smile, Jean replied that he must be prepared for the worst, and that this purchase ensures he will have no worries. He explained to the shopkeeper that since he planned to visit regularly, he needed her to produce as many of her special candies as possible, noting their superior utility compared to standard recovery medicine. Delighted by the prospect, Cynthia clasped her hands together, explaining that his regular business would allow her to continue her hobby. She then asked if there was anything else he needed. He held up a small potion bottle, apologizing that he didn't have enough funds to buy everything he wanted, even with her discount. For today, he was satisfied with the armor, sword, and candy. With his new equipment, he confidently declared his intent to become a real adventurer and promised to pay her in full on his next visit. With her arms crossed, Cynthia simply stated that she understood. Her expression shifted to one of curiosity. She remarked that, on reflection, she hadn't been able to place the aura about him and asked if he was a newly registered adventurer. He confirmed with a smile that he was. A soft blush appeared on her face as she realized something. She admitted that this was the first time she had ever provided such a service to a brand new adventurer. Giving him a thumbs up, she offered a prediction. He would soon be able to catch up with the top adventurers. Surprised, he asked if that was another one of her hunches. She beamed with absolute certainty, confirming that it was, and proudly declared that her hunches were always right. A moment of shared understanding and goodwill passed between them as they both smiled. With their business concluded, they parted ways. Jean turned on the street below to wave goodbye, and Cynthia waved back from the balcony of her shop. In a paved town square, the aggressive adventurer confronts Jean, his face twisted in a snarl. He declares that he's been searching for the boy, furious about being shamed earlier, and loudly proclaims his intent to beat him senseless. He lunges forward, bringing his massive sword down with a cry. Jean, however, calmly sidesteps the blow, which shatters the stone ground. The boy notes to himself that his new equipment is even better than he had anticipated. His initial attack having missed, the adventurer's eyes widen with pure rage. He seethes, vowing to smash the calm expression right off the boy's face. Unfazed, Jean brings a small, round object to his lips, deciding it's the perfect time to test the effects of a mana candy. He pops it into his mouth and calmly accepts the challenge, stating he will be the man's opponent. As the adventurer swings again, Jean meets the attack with his own blade, announcing a magic enhancement as their weapons clash. The enhancement manifests as dark, fiery energy coiling around his sword. He identifies the technique as a combination of swordsmanship, fire magic, and the protection of the sword god. As the power flows through him, he is impressed, realizing that his magic is recovering at a surprisingly good pace. Meanwhile, his opponent seethes with frustration, cursing the boy for running around and effortlessly dodging his attacks. His anger boiling over, the adventurer leaps high into the air, raising his sword for a devastating overhead blow. He shouts the name of his technique, stone crushing, challenging Jean to withstand it. He lets out a furious roar, putting all his weight and power into the attack as his blade descends directly toward Jin's defensive stance. His magically enhanced blade met the adventurer's, and in a flash of heat, the man's armor and gauntlet burst into flames. The adventurer collapsed, screaming in agony as the fire consumed his gear. Jean watched with calm satisfaction, confirming to himself that high-quality equipment was indeed a deciding factor. Despite the pain, the man glared up from the ground, his face contorted with rage. He swore at Jean, vowing that he would not be spared. Fueled by his fury, he lunged forward once more, swinging his broadsword wildly. Jean stood his ground, his expression unwavering as he prepared to meet the attack. With a precise and powerful strike, he slammed his blade against the hilt of his opponent's weapon. The adventurer's sword was torn from his grasp, clattering uselessly to the ground as he cried out in shock. His foe disarmed, Jean took a moment to appreciate his new equipment. He silently thanked Cynthia, realizing the mana candy and the sword had performed far beyond his expectations. His satisfaction was abruptly interrupted by a loud growl from his stomach. He clutched his midsection, suddenly remembering that he had not yet eaten. With the duel concluded, he began walking through the bustling town square. He decided to find a place for lunch first. The matter of choosing an inn could wait. As he walked, his thoughts turned to lodging. He remembered from his past knowledge that while the town had many inns, finding one that was both well-equipped and reasonably priced was a challenge. He mused on the ideal accommodations. Delicious food was a must, he thought with a contented smile, and a place with a shower would be perfect. He arrived before a large, timber-framed building, recognizing it as the Fire Dragon Inn. Based on his memories of the game, this was the only establishment that came to mind. He reasoned that if the people were the same as in the game, then the places must be as well. However, he recalled one significant disadvantage to this particular inn: its age. Pushing the door open, he called out into the dim interior. Receiving no answer, he raised his voice, his call echoing through the seemingly empty establishment. "Is anyone there?" A gruff voice suddenly boomed from the shadows, telling him to shut up. Startled, Jean flinched back, then retorted that there was no need to yell. He could hear perfectly well. In the darkness, a large, intimidating man with a shaved head and a stern goatee emerged, glaring down at the boy. "What do you want, kid?" he demanded. Beneath a rattling sign bearing a black dragon, Jean von Rajnia comes face to face with the inn's proprietor. The large, bald man stands with his arms crossed, his expression severe as he demands to know what a child is doing there. Jean, however, is focused on something else, realizing that the power of the man's aura is different from what he remembers from a game. He lets out a small, almost involuntary laugh. The innkeeper's face contorts with anger, and he shouts at the boy not to laugh at him. Jean quickly raises his hands and apologizes for his reaction. He recalls what he's heard about this place, that they may have the best facilities and food, but its one drawback is the owner, who looks quite scared. The innkeeper, still suspicious, asks if Jean intends to stay the night or eat, warning that he'll get angry if this is just a joke. From nearby, an unseen person advises Jean not to provoke the man. Jean confirms that he is thinking of staying for a few nights and asks if any rooms are available. The innkeeper's demeanor shifts, a grin spreading across his face as he declares it's Jin's lucky day. He holds up a ledger, explaining that all the rooms are currently empty, and Jean can choose anyone he likes. He requests a corner room for a period of 10 days. The innkeeper agrees without hesitation, confirming he will get him a room on the second floor. As the innkeeper begins to write in his ledger, he asks what Jean plans to do for meals during his stay. Jean promptly requests to be served meals in the morning and evening. The man then announces that tonight's special is boa tenderloin stew, assuring Jean he can eat to his heart's content. The boy's eyes widen in surprise as he repeats the name of the dish, scarcely believing it. His surprise melts into pure, unadulterated joy. A glistening piece of cooked meat appears in his mind's eye. He realizes that if this world is the same as the game, then of course this kind of food would exist. With sparkling eyes, he declares that he absolutely wants to eat the boa tenderloin. Having expressed his excitement, he adds that he hopes there's some meat as well, confirming he will have the meal. The innkeeper looks on, amused, and simply tells him to come to the dining room when it's time. He stared in awe as the innkeeper placed a steaming plate before him, announcing it as Carrie specialty, boa tenderloin stew. The sight and aroma were overwhelming. He picked up his knife and fork, deciding to begin with the boar meat. With a quiet blessing for the meal, he took his first bite, his eyes wide with anticipation. The flavor was a revelation. He realized with a jolt of pure joy that this was it. The taste was 100 times better than he had ever imagined. As he savored the stew, the innkeeper explained that the slightly sweet mead paired well with the food. He added that locals often spiced it and drank it as a form of medicine. The innkeeper then remarked that Jean looked tired, asking if the food was suitable for a brat like him. Taking a sip, Jean retorted that he shouldn't call him a brat, nor the innkeeper a bald. Despite the teasing, he smiled brightly and offered his sincere thanks. He was truly glad he chose this inn, even if it took all the money he had. His genuine gratitude seemed to catch the innkeeper off guard. The large man cleared his throat, a faint blush on his cheeks, and replied that he was glad to hear it. He couldn't help but laugh, observing aloud how intimidating it was when a strong, bald man got embarrassed. The innkeeper, flustered, shouted at him to shut up and not poke at people sore spots. The innkeeper's tone shifted. He noted that since Jean had paid for 10 days lodging all at once, he had assumed the boy was a rich adventurer. He then asked directly if Jean was in need of money, catching him by surprise. He explains to the innkeeper that a proper base of operations is crucial for an adventurer, so he cannot be stingy. He believes there is no better inn for him, which is why he prioritized securing a room. He adds with a cheerful grin that besides, he couldn't eat this delicious boar meat unless he was at this specific inn, asking for another serving. The innkeeper listens thoughtfully, stroking his goatee. Taking the empty plate, the innkeeper observes Jin's excellent equipment and confident air. He confirms that Jean is an adventurer and then makes a proposition. Why not take on a request directly from him? Jean seems taken aback, cautiously replying that it depends on the request. He explains that he must avoid standing out too much, lest he be drawn back to a path of darkness. The innkeeper sets the plate down with a clack, reassuring him that it's not a big deal. He simply wants Jean to hunt the very creature he's been eating. He elaborates that the supply of boar meat on the market has been dwindling lately. He's running out of stock and was just about to submit a formal request to the Adventurers Guild. Taking another bite, Jean casually remarks that hunting wild boars isn't difficult. He seems grateful for the simple task, accepting the offer. With the deal struck, the negotiation is successful. The inn stands under the night sky, its lanterns warmly lit. The next morning, far from the capital, Jean von Rajnia ventures into a forest. He wonders aloud where the wild boars for his task are located, hoping they're not too deep within the woods. He pauses, momentarily captivated by the natural beauty surrounding him, remarking to himself how stunning it is, even for what he knows to be a constructed landscape from a game. He quickly shakes off his distraction, reminding himself that this is no time to play around. Though he hasn't officially received a request from a guild, he considers this his first real task and resolves to complete it properly. Focusing his intent, he casts a spell, Magic Detection. A ripple of energy expands from his position as he closes his eyes, sensing the surrounding area. His eyes snap open as the spell yields immediate results. He has found them. A pack of wild boars is surprisingly close, which he notes will save him some time. Without hesitation, he prepares for battle, activating a magic enhancement and invoking his wind attribute. A glowing magical sigil forms around his outstretched hand as the beasts begin to charge. He unleashes the spell, shouting its name, Wind Slash. A powerful blast of air erupts from his hand, striking the charging boars with explosive force. The lead animal is thrown back, sliding across the ground. Jean looks on, slightly surprised by the effect, questioning if they're merely pigs. The force of a single attack is overwhelming. The entire pack of boars collapses to the ground, defeated in an instant. With the boars dispatched, he considers the mission complete. He expresses his relief at having finished the task while it is still daylight and turns to depart. His sense of accomplishment is shattered in an instant. A massive, snarling bear lunges from the foliage, its claws extended. Jean reacts just in time, bringing his sword up to block the ferocious swipe with a grunt of effort as steel clashes against claw. He leaps back to create distance, his eyes wide with shock. He identifies the creature as a crimson bear and chastises himself for letting his guard down, surmising that the scent of the boar's blood must have attracted it. His initial fear gives way to determination as he raises his sword, declaring that he will defeat it right here. He charges forward, but his sword strike clangs uselessly against the bear's tough hide, sending sparks flying. The beast doesn't even flinch. Stunned by its resilience, Jean stares at the growling creature and, in a moment of clarity, realizes the overwhelming power difference. He quietly concedes, whispering, I surrender. His surrender is met not with mercy, but with a terrifying escalation. A second crimson bear emerges from the trees, flanking him. Now trapped between the two roaring beasts, Jean is frozen. He can't believe a creature like this could instill such a feeling in him. He thinks to himself that hunting isn't so simple after all, and that something about this entire situation feels deeply awkward and wrong. He deftly sidesteps a lunging crimson bear, its claws swiping empty air. Realizing this is no game, and that letting these beasts live could mean someone else's death, he steels himself. With a glare, he invokes a new power, Art of Swords, Invocation of the Sword God's Blessing. With a powerful shout, he surges forward, his blessed sword a blur of motion. The two bears roar as they are struck down, collapsing to the forest floor with a heavy thud. The two massive beasts lie still, their rampage brought to a decisive end. He stands over one of the fallen creatures, the immediate danger seemingly past. A sudden, sharp sound from the woods, however, puts him back on alert. From the nearby bushes, not a new threat, but four small bear cubs emerge, rushing towards their fallen parents. His gaze falls upon one of the whimpering cubs. He grips his sword tightly, his expression unreadable as he contemplates his next move. Sometime later, seated by a campfire, he reflects on the weight of his actions. He recalls that killing the lesser dragon was a blur, but this felt different. He had consciously taken a life. He now understands that all creatures, even monsters, fight desperately to live, a reality far from any game. As a tribute, he tried cooking the bear meat, but the smell was too foul. He decides he'll have the rest prepared at an inn called Karudi. He recalls the image of the cubs and his final decision. In the end, he let them go, determined not to fall into a dark path. His reflection is interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. A female voice calls out, asking if he's the kid from before. He looks up to find Elsa, the rabbit-eared adventurer. She notes he's eating Crimson Bear, her favorite, and asks to share. When he agrees, she playfully asks if he knew the rabbit tribe also eats meat, questioning why they're called herbivores. With a sly lick of her finger, she wonders aloud about the word carnivorous, causing him to laugh awkwardly. In a sun-dappled forest clearing, Jean and Elsa rest by a small fire. They are eating skewers of Crimson Bear meat, which sizzles audibly as it cooks with special herbs that enhance its flavor. Both take appreciative bites, savoring the well-earned meal. As he eats, a sobering thought crosses his mind. He may know how to cook Crimson Bear meat because of a game, but that knowledge alone is no guarantee of his continued survival. Elsa notices his somber expression and asks what's wrong, remarking that he looks like a lost child. He deflects, posing a hypothetical question. If a scroll existed that contained the logic of the world, how would she use it to live? Elsa finds the idea amusing. She then turns the question back on him, stating that the person who understands the world's logic is far more interesting than the logic itself, and that her interest lies more with him. Her gaze sharpens as she leans closer, licking her lips. She tells him she knows he possesses something similar to the scroll he described, and she finds it amusing that he's trying to keep it a secret. Startled, Jean can only stare. She reassures him, however, stating that she has no interest in such an item and won't try to take it from him. She asks if he understands, and he gives a slight nod of confirmation. He presses her to answer his original question. Elsa agrees, leaning in close once more. The scroll containing the logic of the world, she whispers, is actually a cursed item. Jean reacts with shock as she explains its nature. It's a curse that irresistibly attracts the curiosity of adventurers. She continues her explanation, holding up a skewer. Even if the scroll listed a Crimson Bear's stats, one could never know the taste of its meat without actually eating it. To know everything is a curse, and an adventurer without such knowledge is unqualified. As an example, she mentions that combining specific herbs with a monster part can create a lure, a piece of practical knowledge beyond mere statistics. As if summoned by her words, a massive, winged creature swoops down from the sky. Jean looks up in alarm, but Elsa remains calm, merely commenting on the creature's intense curiosity. She tells Jean to sit back and watch, declaring that this new arrival is her prey. She turns to him with a wink, calling him a fast-running kid and her lucky boy, since roasted Crimson Bear is her favorite. In that moment, Jean understands. Her own insatiable curiosity is a curse as well. With a determined look, Elsa draws her sword, ready for the fight. Without hesitation, she leaps forward, blade held high, meeting the charge of the snarling, reptilian-headed beast as it lunges with claws extended. She descends upon the winged monster, her blade flashing in a powerful arc as she lets out a sharp cry. Her strike sends a spray of blood from the creature's neck, but it remains standing, roaring in defiance as she lands gracefully. She clicks her tongue in frustration, realizing the cut was too shallow. Before she can plan her next move, Jean streaks past her, his voice ringing out as he invokes the sword god's divine protection to enhance his swordsmanship. He leaps into the air with a powerful cry, sword held high, aiming directly for the beast's exposed neck. His eyes burn with intense focus as he brings the blade down in a swift, decisive slash. The sword slices cleanly through the monster's thick hide, felling the creature in a single blow. Landing softly, he earns a look of impressed surprise from Elsa, who remarks on his skill and thanks him for the help. He reflects on the unexpected events that constantly occur, realizing there's a limit to what he can handle alone. He knows he must learn more about this world and stop relying solely on his game knowledge to avoid death routes. Recalling the people he's met, he resolves to use every encounter to forge a path to survival. Seeing his determined expression, Elsa asks if he has resolved his troubles. She smiles, explaining that what he feels is the burning curiosity that defines an adventurer. She tells him that the path one chooses and all the responsibilities that come with it are one's own to bear. Her philosophical moment passes quickly. Her eyes light up as she thanks him again for his help, eagerly suggesting they get to work dismantling the monster's corpse. Jean looks away, flustered, muttering to himself that this is the second time this has happened. Walking through the woods, Jean von Rajnia considers that he must now make his first-ever request report. He soon arrives back at the inn, where the innkeeper, Ricardo, greets him at the counter. Ricardo notes that he's late and was about to miss dinner, to which Jean responds with a flustered sigh of relief. The innkeeper stares intently at him, stroking his goatee. He remarks that Jean suddenly seems more like a proper adventurer and asks if something happened. Jean remains silent, looking away. He quickly dismisses the concern, claiming it was nothing. Changing the subject, he states that he wants to discuss the request he completed. Ricardo seems to accept the deflection, listening patiently. Jean explains that because the number of items is large, he'll need to borrow the warehouse. A magical sigil glows on his hand as the innkeeper realizes with a shock that the boy possesses storage magic. Inside the storeroom, Ricardo is astonished, noting that items placed within the magic's influence are kept perfectly fresh. He wonders aloud how a mere boy could possess such a rare skill. Upon closer inspection of the monster carcasses, Ricardo observes how cleanly they were felled. He deduces they were all taken down by a single blast of wind magic, a feat that even a high-ranking mage would find difficult. He concludes that a newcomer couldn't possibly possess such power. He turns to Jean and asks what kind of life he has lived up to this point. Jean deflects the question, stating that an adventurer's personal information is confidential. He then hands Ricardo a pouch as payment, thanking him for completing the request. Ricardo accepts, acknowledging it was an important task, then remembers something else, asking if Jean has any other hidden gems. In response, Jean presents a massive slab of meat, asking if Ricardo can cook something with it. The innkeeper is stunned, immediately recognizing it as the meat of a crimson bear. Jean explains that he tried cooking it himself earlier, but it smelled awful, so he had a member of the rabbit folk prepare it for him. Ricardo asks if by the meat-loving rabbit folk, he means Elsa. As he speaks, an image of Elsa winking playfully appears between them. Jean confirms that he does, though he seems to only vaguely understand the connection. The innkeeper explains that the rabbit folk are a race with extensive knowledge of herbs. He gestures emphatically, stating that Elsa's knowledge in particular is second to none. He adds that while she may appear frivolous, her skills are the real deal. Enthusiastically, Ricardo tells Jean to wait right there, promising to let him taste Elsa's herb-roasted specialty. Jean agrees. The innkeeper immediately gets to work, expertly chopping the crimson bear meat and tossing it into a sizzling hot pan. He proudly presents the finished dish, the Carryuin's special crimson bear stewed in red wine. The rich aroma rises from the steaming plate. As he sets the meal down, he grumbles that such a delicate preparation is wasted on someone with such a rough appearance, but still tells the boy to eat up. Jean takes a hesitant first bite. His eyes widen in astonishment. He can't believe this is truly the meat from that ferocious bear. The flavor is incredible. Seeing the boy's pure delight, the innkeeper declares that such a luxurious dish calls for a special fruit wine and decides to join him. Together, they share the feast. Later that night, at the Adventurers Guild, Finn smiles brightly. She congratulates Elsa on her recent wyvern subjugation, remarking on how impressive her solo activities always are. She turns to find Elsa leaning against the counter. Elsa brushes off the compliment, her interest piqued by something else. She asks Finn if she's heard anything about the lucky boy lately. Her question startles Finn, who immediately asks if Elsa has registered him as a partner. Elsa just laughs, reminding her that she's a solo adventurer at heart. Finn's thoughts then drift to Jean, imagining him in his room with the air of a prince awaiting a grand reception. This, she muses, is also a part of an adventurer's life. On a bright morning, Jean arrives at the Grand Adventurers Guild Hall. He approaches the front desk with a smile, greeting the receptionist. "Good morning, Finn. Do you have a request for me today?" She asks if he means a partner registration with the guild's receptionists. Jean confirms, and the system is laid out. A receptionist with a partner contract gives that adventurer priority for requests, and in return, the guild takes a portion of the reward as a fee. Finn notes that she has never heard of a beginner registering a partner before. He reflects that this world is much like a game where the guild scouts adventurers. To survive, he must carve his own path. He assures Finn that he has enough money not to be a burden and is confident in his abilities, believing this partnership would also benefit the guild. She seems to understand his reasoning. With renewed determination, he asks if he can register a partner now. Finn explains that designating a receptionist who already has a partner would cause issues. When Jean asks if she has a partner contract with anyone, she blushes and admits that she doesn't, having only recently received her license. He then directly asks to partner with her, explaining that she's been a great help to him since he first registered. Finn is left speechless, her face flushing red. Stunned, she stammers, asking if he is certain he wants her. After her initial shock, Finn agrees and rushes off to prepare the contract. As she leaves, Jean thinks to himself that he must improve his standing to survive. His thoughts are interrupted by an aggressive voice. A man confronts him, demanding to know if he truly intends to form a partnership with Finn. The man angrily declares that he's been looking out for Finn since she was new and that a mere brat like Jean is out of her league. He tells Jean to know his place and not to bother her. Unfazed, Jean calmly asks the man what he is trying to say. Enraged, the adventurer shouts that he has been pursuing Finn and lunges forward, throwing a punch. Jean sidesteps the attack with ease, causing the man to stumble past him, shocked at the boy's swiftness. He stands over his fallen opponent, fist clenched. He declares that Finn was the only one who was kind to him when he was a new adventurer, and that he knows better than anyone how gentle she is. He vows he will never let someone who would make her cry near her, and that he will absolutely make her happy. The downed adventurer smirks, telling him to look behind it. Turning, Jean is horrified to see Finn standing there, steam practically rising from her head in embarrassment. Beside her, Elsa smiles, teasingly telling Finn she should be happy about his promise. Finn stammers that the preparations are ready. All Jean can manage is a quiet, mortified agreement. He and Finn stood together as they finalized their partner contract, a process entirely different from what he had known. The document before them seemed to shimmer with a magical aura, signifying the weight of their agreement. The signing was followed by a formal vow before grand, glowing seal within the guild hall. Finn declared their oath aloud, pledging that they would support each other as partners. Jean noted the gravity of the moment, Unlike in the game where a simple dialogue box would confirm the contract, this was a true, binding promise. With the ceremony complete, they turned to face one another. Finn smiled warmly, stating that she was looking forward to working with him. Jean returned the sentiment with a confident smile of his own, formally accepting their new arrangement. Their private moment, however, was interrupted by a deliberate cough. Elsa stood nearby with a group of other adventurers. She claimed she hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but then turned to the eager crowd, announcing that everyone was waiting for the oath to be finished. With a mischievous wink, she declared that there was only one thing to do: throw a party. Inside the bustling Adventurers Guild, mugs of ale are raised in a celebratory toast. Jean, Elsa, and another adventurer are enjoying the festivities. Turning his attention from the party, Jean speaks directly to a flustered Finn, stating that there is something he wants her to know about it. He reveals his status to her. It lists his name as Jean, age 12, with affinities for fire, water, wind, earth, and light. He is level 31, with immense physical and magical power. His unique abilities include growth promotion and interdimensional box, alongside divine protections from various gods. Finn stares in shock. Jean explains that his level increased thanks to the Crimson Bear Hunt and his growth ability. Stunned, she can only ask what he truly is. He clarifies that while he was a noble until a few days ago, he is now merely a former noble. Finn is incredulous, insisting that such a high status is impossible for a commoner. She points out that his level alone is nearly on par with a silver-class adventurer. Internally, Jean reflects that the system in this world is remarkably similar to that of a game. This world's class system for adventurers is divided into 6 ranks: wood, iron, bronze, silver, gold, and the highest, platinum. Finn smiles, reassuring Jean that with his level, even subjugation quests should be safe. She then asks if there is anything he is unskilled at. Jean admits that he has no experience in interpersonal combat. She acknowledges that he is only 12 and wonders how he might train for such a thing. Their conversation is cut short by a gruff adventurer who approaches their table. He claims Jean tricked him earlier and demands recompense. With a smirk, he offers to be Jin's sparring partner. The man suggests they borrow a room in the back. Finn immediately objects, reminding him that private duels are forbidden within a guild. He dismisses her concern, claiming it's fine if no one sees. As Finn warns Jean not to be provoked, the adventurer draws his sword, taunting the boy and declaring that the blade is his specialty. He moves to stand directly behind Jean, his larger frame towering over the boy. He states that if Jean had run, he would have let him go, but now he won't hold back. He sets the terms. They will each take 3 steps, turn, and then begin the duel. Jean quietly agrees, and they begin to pace away from each other. But on the count of 2, the adventurer spins and lunges, attacking prematurely. Jean reacts just in time, his sword meeting his opponent's in a shower of sparks. The boy's eyes are wide with shock at the treachery. The adventurer smirks, thinking to himself that while Jean is skilled, he lacks the true killer instinct required for fighting other people. Reeling from the unexpected force, Jean grits his teeth. He cannot lose this fight and jeopardize the partnership contract he just made with Finn. With a determined roar, he calls upon his skills, activating swordsmanship and sword god's divine protection. Empowered, he pushes back against his opponent's blade. The adventurer's smirk turns to a grin of genuine excitement. He compliments Jin's sword strike, admitting it sends a chill down his spine. As their blades lock, Jean feels a surge of confidence. He can win this. He stands over his opponent, who has suddenly dropped to his knees. The gruff adventurer, his bravado gone, apologizes profusely, admitting he was wrong. Jean can only stare, bewildered by the sudden surrender. The apology, however, is a ruse. The adventurer snaps his fingers and shouts the word for a spell. Flash! A blinding light erupts from his hand. As Jean recoils, the adventurer laughs triumphantly. He gloats that he never said he would only use a sword, mocking the boy's inexperience by pointing out that real combatants must always be wary of lies. He correctly deduces that Jin's eyes have already recovered thanks to his status abnormality resistance. The man then reveals his true standing. He is a bronze-ranked adventurer, far more experienced than he let on. Realizing he's been thoroughly tested, Jean decides it is time to fight seriously. He invokes the divine protection of the magic god, channeling power and activating his magic enhancement skill. Before he can react to Jin's power-up, the duel is abruptly interrupted. A loud clang rings out as Finn, the guild receptionist, smacks the adventurer squarely on the head with a heavy frying pan. Wielding the pan like a club, she furiously reminds them of the guild's rules, questioning if they recall her explicit prohibition on private duels. Jean stands beside Elsa, looking chastened. The tension dissolves into a lively celebration. The entire guild hall raises their mugs in a toast, with a smiling Finn at the center. The gruff adventurer, now part of the festivities, makes a mental note to never, ever get on her bad side again. Inside the Adventurers Guild, the receptionist Finn asks Jean if he plans to continue his activities solo. He sits across from her, explaining that he would like a companion to broaden the range of quests he can accept and to train with, calling it the proper path for an adventurer. Finn expresses her surprise, noting that she didn't expect him to feel that way. With a bright smile, Jean confirms that he enjoys the adventuring life. Now outside the city walls, he reflects on the high-risk quest he was given. He clenches a fist, thinking that the benefits of a partner contract are indeed substantial. As he walks through a grassy field, a sudden sense of unease stops him. He looks around, realizing he should be in orc territory by now, but finds the silence strange. He quickly discovers the reason for the quiet. Dark stains of blood mark nearby rocks. He deduces that someone has already fought orcs here, and worries that the lingering scent of blood will attract other monsters. His concern is validated as two hulking orcs emerge, led by the same gruff adventurer from before. Jean realizes with a smirk that this ambush was intentional. Deciding to end things quickly, he summons fire attribute magic, engulfing his blade in flames. He lunges forward, a blur of motion. His flaming sword cuts a clean arc through the air, slicing into the orc wielding a club. With the threat neutralized, he clenches his fist and runs past the fallen creature. As he moves, he casts storage magic, causing the orc's body to vanish completely. Stopping the now empty field, Jean kneels and places a hand on the ground, casting a magic detection spell. Ripples of energy emanate outwards from his position, scanning the area. His spell picks up something. He hears the frantic pounding of footsteps approaching rapidly. He identifies the source as adventurers, but senses they are fleeing from something other than a monster. His detection then picks up a different, powerful magic signature nearby. Someone is fighting a crimson bear. A sense of urgency grips him as he realizes the adventurer's magic is weakening. He realized the scent of the adventurer's blood was drawing more monsters to the area. There was no time to waste. Gathering his energy, he unleashed a powerful wind attribute spell, determined to reach the battle in time. Meanwhile, a young catgirl adventurer fought desperately against two vicious, wolf-like beasts. With a bleeding gash on her leg, she felt her strength failing, believing it was the end for her and her companion. One of the beasts swiped at her, knocking her sword from her grasp. As she fell backward, she realized with horror that the other creature was lunging at her from behind, its jaws wide open. In a flash of motion, a blade of wind sliced through the air, decapitating both monsters just moments before their teeth could find their target. The cat girl stared up in stunned silence as Jean landed before her, his expression one of grim determination. With the immediate threat gone, he allowed himself a small, relieved smile. He had made it in time. The two adventurers could only watch, speechless, as he stood over the slain beasts. He approached the injured girl, asking if she was okay and could stand. Helping her to her feet, he then questioned why she was fighting all alone in such a dangerous place. She explained that her companions had used her as a decoy to escape a crimson bear. As she fled, she ended up cornered here. Jean realized with a start that these must have been the other adventurers his magic had detected. The memory brought a fresh wave of terror. She recounted how she was being chased by the crimson bear, and just when she thought she had escaped, she was cornered by orcs. She had been at her absolute limit. He reassured her that she was safe now. Finding a place to rest, he began tending to her wounds. She apologized for him using what looked like expensive medicine, but he insisted, telling her the wound could get infected if left untreated. He reassures the elf girl, Cynthia, that it was no trouble. He explains that a kind elf had sold him a potion at a low price precisely for such an emergency. Overjoyed, Cynthia expresses her heartfelt thanks. The catgirl adventurer watches him, a look of awe on her face. She remarks that he is truly a strange one, being friends with an elf and felling a monster in a single blow. In light of his actions, she formally introduces herself as Khloe and thanks him once more. He replies that his name is Jean, adding that it is an honor to meet her and that he looks forward to knowing her. Their introduction is sealed with a firm handshake. As they walk away from the forest, Jean states that he cannot forgive the party that used Khloe as a decoy. He suggests they rest for a bit, then return to the guild to make a report. Khloe readily agrees. Inside the Adventurers Guild, a smug blonde adventurer and his party surround a lone girl. He recounts his version of events, claiming Khloe got scared and ran off, causing a great deal of trouble for the rest of them. With a cruel smirk, he belittles her, calling her an annoyance. Suddenly, Khloe herself appears, asking what they're talking about. The blonde adventurer recoils in shock. His companions express relief that she is safe, but he quickly recovers his arrogance, berating her for not being a team player and demanding to know why she thinks she can just rejoin their party. Jean steps forward, cutting them off. He loudly addresses Finn, the receptionist, identifying the group as the ones who abandoned Khloe to a crimson bear. The spiky-haired adventurer scoffs, declaring it impossible for a mere slave to survive such an encounter. With a sharp grin, Jean announces that he has proof. Standing behind her desk, Finn delivers the guild's official verdict. The party is to have their adventurer qualifications revoked. They are banned from re-registering for 1 year, banned from guild employment for 6 months, and must forfeit a portion of their party's assets to Khloe. The verdict renders the guilty adventurers speechless. The blonde leader stammers, unable to comprehend the word forfeit. Jean and Khloe observe their shock, their expressions firm. Finn then bows deeply to Khloe, apologizing for the guild's lack of investigation and for not believing her. As Khloe accepts the apology, Jean reassures her, stating he was simply completing his request. He then turns to Finn to submit his report and finalize the mission. To complete the report, Jean opens a swirling dark portal, for which the massive crimson bear emerges as a bonus. The onlookers, including Finn, Elsa, and Cynthia, are stunned, whispering that his power far surpasses the silver class. They agree that with such strength, he should find good companions to advance, as there are limits to solo adventuring. He agrees with their sentiment, remarking that growing alongside companions is one of the joys of being an adventurer. Khloe's face lights up, and she enthusiastically concurs, saying she has always felt the same way. Her eyes sparkle with excitement as she explains that ever since she was a child reading adventure tales, she has dreamed of having such an adventure herself one day. Moved by her earnest dream, Jean smiles warmly. He asks if, in that case, she would like to have a fun adventure together with him. Khloe is left utterly stunned and speechless by the sudden invitation. Still processing his offer, she looks toward the guild receptionist, Finn, who cheerfully confirms that Jin's profile matches Khloe's stated preferences. The receptionist adds that with her personal endorsement, there should be no issues. Overwhelmed, Khloe turns back to Jean, her voice filled with disbelief as she asks if he is truly certain about choosing someone like her. He responds with a brilliant, unwavering smile, declaring that she is the one he wants. His words seal the agreement. He extends his hand, and she takes it, her face breaking into a radiant, joyful smile as they formally become a party. At the Adventurers Guild, Khloe asks Jean if she can take the Vanguard position. He agrees, asking if this means she possesses a Vanguard-oriented skill. She confirms she has body-strengthening magic and swordsmanship level 3, which have served her well. Nearby, the guild receptionist Finn overhears them. She notes that Khloe's most lauded skill is actually her reconnaissance technique and, with a smile, offers to introduce the pair to a subjugation request perfectly suited for them. The next day, at the Kajiro Inn, Jean is greeted by the innkeeper, Ricardo. He tells Jean it's good timing, as he was about to wake him for breakfast with his companion. Ricardo then grins, adding that while he's grateful for the strong bodyguard, Jean had better take responsibility for her. Jean is left looking confused. Following the innkeeper's words, he enters the dining area and stops short. He sees Khloe already at a table, happily digging into a meal. He thinks to himself. She spots him and greets him cheerfully, exclaiming how delicious the breakfast is. He approaches the table, apologizing for being late. Khloe assures him he's actually much earlier than their agreed-upon time. Looking slightly embarrassed, Jean admits he was so worried about oversleeping that he waited until the last possible moment. Khloe's face lights up with a joyful grin. She confesses that she was so excited about her first request with him that she couldn't sit still. Hearing her earnest confession, Jean smiles warmly. He admits that he was also too excited to sleep well. With breakfast finished, he declares that they should head out immediately. Out in the field, Jean, Khloe, and 2 other adventurers review a map. A High Orc's territory has been confirmed nearby. Jean states their objective: subdue the High Orc and retrieve as many materials as possible. He then turns to Khloe, suggesting her intuitive reconnaissance is better suited for this than his magic detection. He asks if she can pinpoint the target's location. She gets down on all fours, pressing an ear to the ground. She confirms she can hear the sound of footsteps, but also senses something else, a feeling on her skin, a scent in the air. She can sense the faint traces of a High Orc. Jean marvels at the beastman's ability. Suddenly, Khloe's ears twitch, and she jolts upright. Springing to her feet, she points ahead, announcing she's found them. She reports seeing 2 High Orcs and 1 Orc. Jean is stunned that she could discern such details from this distance. Her expression shifts to one of concern. She warns Jean not to let his guard down, as something feels wrong. It's as if the tracks were left intentionally to lead them here. The realization dawns on Jean. It's a trap. He considered the situation. High Orcs were known to be more intelligent than their lesser kin, and he suspected they had been deliberately lured into this position. A little more reconnaissance seemed wise. From the cover of the dense foliage, he and Khloe observed their targets in a clearing ahead. Confirming Khloe's report of 2 High Orcs, he formulated a plan. He would initiate the attack with magic, entrusting her to handle the vanguard. As she readied her blade, he began to cast, calling upon the power of the wind. In response to his spell, the High Orcs moved with startling speed. One of them, larger than the rest, swung a massive curved blade in a powerful arc, ready to meet the magical assault head-on. The creature snarled defiantly. Jean shouted for Khloe to go, and without hesitation, she sprang forward, declaring she would handle it. As she closed the distance, the hulking High Orc brought its weapon down in a vicious chop. Khloe met the blow with a cry. Behind her, Jean crouched low, realizing that at this proximity, he should be able to use his magic detection for a more precise reading of the battlefield. The impact shattered the earth, throwing rock and soil into the air. The sheer force of the blow was staggering, but what was revealed in the dust stunned Jean into disbelief. His magic revealed the truth. Dozens more High Orcs were rising from the ground. They had been covered in mud, perfectly camouflaged and hidden from Khloe's senses. He understood now. They had been intentionally lured into a massive ambush. While Jean processed the terrifying discovery, Khloe was already locked in a desperate struggle, letting out a fierce cry as she deflected a savage blow. The force of the parry sent her stumbling back. She cried out to Jean, warning him that their opponents were incredibly strong. Her brief cry for help created a fatal opening. The High Orc leader loomed over her, weapon raised high for a final, crushing blow. As Khloe stared up in horror, Jean, now wreathed in the light of a powerful spell, yelled out a desperate warning. Just as the High Orc's blades were about to fall, they were suddenly and violently cut down, their bodies collapsing in front of her. Stunned, she could only stammer, questioning if she had truly been saved. Jean turned to her, his expression serious, and warned her that it was too early to feel relieved. He explained that there were others targeting them from the shadows, but unfortunately for their hidden assailants, they had just been exposed.